Um, Good afternoon. Today I'm going to be talking to you about what a fraction is. I'm not actually going to talk to you about it. I'm going to try and show you as best as I can. So what is a fraction? I got this nice whole orange. Everyone agree with me? That's a whole orange. In order to get a fraction, you have to start out with a whole. Now I want you to remember what that whole looks like, because when we start getting into what a fraction is, you want to come back to this whole. You always come back to a whole. Now what is a fraction? Well, what if I wanted to take this orange and I wanted to give some of it to somebody else? Well, what would I do? Would I give them the whole orange? Would that be fair if I just gave it away? Here, have it. Or do I need to do something to it to make it fair? A fraction is fair. When we make fractions, we want to remember fair. So how do I make that fair? What do I want to do to get it into its... That's right, make it into pieces. And I can divide. Divide is a key word here. This orange into different pieces or parts. So what is a fraction? A fraction is the parts that make up a whole. And we can't see the parts right now because I haven't made it into its parts. Right now all the parts are together because you have a whole. So let's divide this into parts. And I want you to watch what I do, because I want you to remember that when we have fractions, the parts have to be the same. They have to be equal parts. And when we're sharing, or when you're getting cake or ice cream or pizza, you want your parts to be fair. You want them to be the same. So we want to make sure when we divide or make our fractions or take our whole and divide it into pieces, we make them equal. So I'm just going to make this. I only have one other person that I want to share this with. So here we go. There we go. Now, I have what? I have a fraction of a whole now. This is a piece of my whole. This is a part of my whole. And when I put these two parts back together, what do I get? I get the whole again. So what is a fraction? A fraction is an equal part of a whole. An equal part of a whole. And let me show you again what I mean by that. So here's another way. So say I can share this with two people. Fairly, I can give someone else that other half, and I can take this half, and we can have the same amount. I have how much? I have one out of how many pieces? Two. Okay? That make a whole. So now I have two more friends come along, and I need to divide this whole. I need to divide this whole into two equal parts again. I think I moved, or two equal parts again. So what could I do? I could cut them in half again. But now my whole's not changing. The size of my whole's not changing, but the size of my parts are changing. And now I've made new parts. I haven't changed what my whole is, because if I put these pieces back together, I'm still going to end up with the orange that I started out with. However, I have divided equal parts, or more equal parts, and I can share with more people. So what is a fraction? A fraction is an equal part of a whole. This is part of a whole. The whole orange, this is just part of it. This is part of the whole orange. This is part of the whole orange. And this is part of the whole orange. And if I put them all back together again, it would still be one whole orange. So that's a fraction. A fraction is one part. Now, how many parts do I have now? I have four. 1, 2, 3, 4. That make up the entire orange. And if I just took this for myself, What part is that? That's 1. 1 out of how many? 4. That's a fraction. A piece, a part of a whole is what a fraction is. The next question that I want to answer for you today is, what does a fraction look like? And this is where I did have a pen, a plate over there, and I forgot to use it. So now I'm going to show you what a fraction looks like. So this is what a fraction looks like. Or how do I could answer how I write a fraction too. So how do I write a fraction? Or what does it look like? Just to move that. So how do I write a fraction? Or what does a fraction look like? Well, remember when we started out with our whole? And then the first part we did, we divided it into how many parts? 2 parts, right? And if I gave one of those away and I keep this part, how many do I have? I have 1 part out of how many? 2. Okay, let's talk about that again, just real fast. If I divide the orange in half like I did at first, right, 2 equal halves, and I give 1 away and I keep this one, how many parts do I have? I have 1 of the parts, but how many did I have out of 2? And the 2 is important to remember because that's how many parts we have of the whole, okay? So let's look at that again. So what does that look like when we write a fraction? Okay, what was our whole? How many parts did we have to equal our whole? We had 2, right? So here's 2. This is the part that equals your whole. Okay, when I cut the orange in half, I had 2 parts. And when I put those 2 parts together, that would equal my whole. And then I'm going to make a line. If I take one of parts and give it away, what would I keep? I'd keep one of them. So here I'm going to put that part, the part that I have is going to go on top of my whole. So here I have my whole, and then the number, or this is your part, I should say, your part that you have goes on top. So now this is 1 out of 2, but it also equals 1/2. Okay, so that's how I write a fraction. I do a part over a whole, and you'll learn later on that this sign is actually out of 2. So I had 1 part out of 2, and the 2 again is what my whole was. The different parts that I had that equaled my whole. And when I cut it that first time, I only had 2 parts. Now when I went ahead and cut both of those in half, I ended up having how many parts? How many parts did I have? 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And when I put that back together, that's my whole. So that's how I count those. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 total parts. So again, that's going to go on the bottom. My parts are going on the bottom. Not my parts, sorry. Oh, confusing. My whole is going on the bottom, and how many each part is goes on the top. So if I, being hungry, take 2, because there's only 2 of us, I'll take 2 parts. I have, how many go on top? 2. I'm gonna have to do this somewhere. 2. So here's my parts. And that number can change depending. Maybe I only had 1 part out of my 4. Maybe my daughter wanted 1. Maybe my other daughter wanted 1. So then I ended up with 1 part out of 4 whole. So that's how you write a fraction. You have your parts over your whole, or you have 1 out of 4. And this, you can, on the top, I could take all 4 of those, and I would take 4 parts out of 4, which would give me the whole orange. Or I could take 3 of these pieces, and I would have 1, 2, 3 parts out of 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's how you write a fraction. And that's what a fraction looks like. And I kind of tackled the different parts of a fraction too, but I'm going to talk about that again. Now that my hands are all sticky and my dry erase marker or board is all sticky, parts of a fraction. Well, I'm going to go a different route right now. I'm going to draw a triangle, okay? And you can't really divide a triangle into too many different ways that are going to be equal, so I'm just going to do this down the middle. Okay, now remember that whole triangle, without that, that's my hole right there. Now when I divide it into two, my hole doesn't change. It's still that whole triangle. However, I have parts of that triangle. I can make that triangle up in two different ways. So I have one part here and one part here, and if you notice, they're both equal. So how many parts do I have? I have two. I have two parts that make up my entire triangle. So that's my whole. We also like to call this our denom, and of course my marker now has denominator, my denominator. Okay, my denominator. Can we say denominator? Very good. So there's my whole. If I shade this in, how much is that? That's one of my parts. Yes, I've only shaded in one of my parts. That's the part I put on top. The shaded part goes on top. So I have one of my two parts shaded. So this is the part again. And we like to call that top number our numerator. So those are the different parts of our fraction. So again, real fast. I'm gonna leave this. A fraction is, you take a whole. Let's draw this over again. You take a whole object, okay, and you wanna make equal parts. So I'm gonna show you, would this be equal parts right here? If I had this part, you had that part, and my daughter had that part, would that be fair? No. So I want to make sure when I'm dividing my shapes again that they're in two equal parts. So I'm just going to go right down the middle. And now I have two parts. Now am I going to be able to share with a lot of people? No, I can only share with how many? 1, 2, because there's two parts of my entire triangle. Remember the bottom, your denominator. Your denominator is going to be how many you have together. So again, with my orange here, how many parts did I had? I had 1, 2, 3, 4, not 4 oranges, but 4 parts of my whole orange. I have 2 parts of my whole triangle. Okay, and that's my denominator. Okay, then when I go to take apart, like this is the part I'm gonna get, this is the part over here that I'm gonna shade, that I'm going to share with my friend. So when I go to shade, or when I go to take apart, just like I'm going to take a part of my orange, that's the part that's going on top. That's your numerator, your numerator. That's the part that's shaded, or the part that you're going to eat, or the part that your mom's going to eat, or the part that you're going to give away. So, and then you have your little bar. And then later on in life, you'll learn that that is your division. So it's actually 1 divided by 2, but that's for later on in life. I think that answers all the questions. What I want you to think about is, how can I practice today making fractions? We use fractions in the kitchen a lot. And what you might use your fractions for.